It's August 29th here in Seoul, and I'm Kim Dami. We begin with these stories making the headlines at this hour, starting with UN member states' criticism of North Korea's latest spy satellite launch. A number of UN member states, including Seoul, Washington, and Tokyo, slammed Pyongyang's second trial last Thursday. The regime insisted the launch was a self-defense measure and refused to be bound by UN Security Council resolutions. More than 300 North Koreans on Monday returned home from China's Dandong city by road for the first time since the pandemic, just 2 days after the regime announced the official reopening of its borders over the weekend. U.S. Commerce Secretary Gina Raimondo and Chinese Commerce Minister Wang Wentao agreed to set up new communication channels to address their lingering feud, namely trade issues, following 4 hours after what they call very open discussions in Beijing. A number of UN member states, including South Korea, the U.S., and Japan, have called North Korea out on its recent failed attempt at launching a spy satellite into orbit. Now, the North refused to back down, insisting the launch was a legitimate self-defense act. Lee Seung-jae starts us off.
During a meeting of the United Nations Open-Ended Working Group for Space Security held at the UN office in Geneva on Monday, a number of countries, including South Korea, the U.S., and Japan, condemned North Korea's recent attempt at launching a military reconnaissance satellite. Speaking at the meeting, Park Eun-jin, South Korea's Director of Disarmament and Non-Proliferation at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, said that attempts made by the North to send a military spy satellite using ballistic missile technology are illegal, stressing that Pyongyang is getting closer to achieving its goal of advancing the necessary technology. Japan's representative also slammed the recent launch, saying that it goes against UN Security Council resolutions and poses a serious threat to countries in the region. However, North Korea's permanent representative to the United Nations Secretariat in Geneva, Han Dae-sung, argued that UN Security Council resolutions are illegal documents that violate the UN Charter and that Pyongyang will not be bound by such resolutions led by the United States and its allies. Han continued to argue that other countries have also launched satellites, with South Korea and the U.S. constantly conducting joint military drills. Such launches are self-defense measures directly related to guaranteeing the safety of the country. The U.S. quickly responded by saying that while the joint drills are defensive in nature, the North's ballistic missile launches are not. The UN Open-Ended Working Group for Space Security is a working-level consultative body established by the UN General Assembly to create responsible norms of conduct, and comes after North Korea conducted its second attempt to send a military spy satellite into orbit, which failed last Thursday. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
While tensions are unsettling here on the Korean Peninsula, North Korean leader Kim Jong-un called for his Navy's war readiness and said it will become part of the North's nuclear deterrent. According to the regime state-run media on Tuesday, Kim Jong-un marked the Day of the Navy by inspecting the North's naval headquarters near Pyongyang with his daughter. Kim called on the Navy's overwhelming and preemptive offensive against any unexpected conflict, while promising that it will be provided with a new means of arms and will be a component of the state nuclear deterrent. Kim also referred to the Korean Peninsula as the most dangerous zone for nuclear war, citing Washington's deployment of strategic assets in the South while criticizing the Seoul, Washington, Tokyo plan to hold joint drills. More than 300 North Koreans made it back to their motherland from China on Monday, following the regime's official reopening of the border for the first time since the pandemic. According to sources, 300 to 400 North Koreans left Dandong in northeastern China by bus for the North's border city of Siniju. This marked the first time the North Koreans have traveled back home by road since the North closed its borders in January 2020 due to the pandemic. Sources say more than 100 North Koreans will return home on Tuesday, with the total set to reach over 1,000 by the end of this week. Among those returning are students and government and trade workers. Washington and Beijing are working to sort out their persisting conflicts like trade issues, this time by laying out a working group and communication channels. Our Lee Soo-jin has more.
The United States and China have agreed to set up new channels of communication in an effort to bolster their economic relationship. During a 4-hour meeting on Monday, U.S. Commerce Secretary Gina Raimondo and her Chinese counterpart Wang Wentao agreed to form a working group to solve trade and investment issues as well as advance U.S. commercial interests in China. The working group will hold vice ministerial meetings twice a year, with the first meeting to be held early next year in the U.S. The U.S. and China also agreed to a government information exchange that will serve as a platform to discuss export control issues. The first in-person meeting will be held on Tuesday in Beijing. Raimondo emphasized that the information exchange will be for sharing more information about U.S. export restrictions on advanced technology and that the U.S. will not be compromising or negotiating on issues such as national security. There will also be regular communication on the secretarial or ministerial level with meetings to take place at least annually. These negotiations are part of the Biden administration's recent efforts to ease tensions between the two countries. Raimondo is the latest to visit China after other senior U.S. officials such as Secretary of State Antony J. Blinken, Treasury Secretary Janet L. Yellen, and the president's climate envoy, John Kerry. Raimondo emphasized the importance of stable economic relations between the two nations.
As you well know, our teams have worked over the summer to establish new information on this point. We seek healthy competition with China.
Wang responded by saying that China is ready to make efforts to strengthen cooperation between U.S. and Chinese companies. Raimondo is scheduled to meet other key Chinese officials during the rest of the 4-day visit that will end on August 30th, and those meetings are expected to continue to focus on trade and transparency to improve ties between the world's top two economies. 이수진, Arirang News.
President Yoon on Monday pushed for a high-tech advancement of a maritime patrol, marking the 70th anniversary of the Korea Coast Guard. Attending a ceremony held in the western port city of Incheon, Yoon voiced his support for the country's maritime law enforcement, saying that the safety of the waters are vital to South Korea's global trade as a rising sea power. He also pledged to support the establishment of a data platform on maritime information driven by cutting-edge technology.
위성, 드론, 수중 로봇, 정찰기 등으로 수집한 빅데이터를 AI로 분석함으로써 관할 해역의 범위를 70%까지 확대하고 각종 해상 재난에 신속하고 정확한 대응을 할 수 있게 됩니다.
And thanking the uniformed guards for their service, the president asked the Coast Guard to prepare for and promptly respond to maritime accidents to protect the lives and safety of people at sea. South Korea has been shaken more than ever by senseless and inhumane crimes, from the so-called "don't ask why" stabbings to online murder threats. How is the country trying to tame fears and deal with the unprecedented wave of violence? We're joined by Kwon Hyuk-sung this morning to discuss. Great to have you with us.
Thank you for having me here.
The latest drama here in the country saw a man in his 30s threatening to hurt himself in northern Seoul over the weekend. Now, he was arrested after 2 hours of standoff, and he didn't harm or hurt anyone. But can or will he still be punished?
Well, in my opinion, yes, he could be charged and punished. Even if he didn't harm anyone, he did disturb the public without a reasonable excuse. And most importantly, he didn't follow a lawful direction of police officers. On top of that, I believe he actually tried to threaten the police officers with knives in his hand who were executing a lawful police duty. This can be accused of a crime named obstruction of performance of official duties. It refers to the act of obstructing or interfering with public officials, such as police officers, while they are performing their official duties. These kinds of behaviors can be sentenced with up to 5 years in jail or can be fined up to 10 million won.
Right. He didn't hurt anybody, and still the police was also threatened for just fulfilling their duties at the time. But the thing is, they chose not to use tasers during the latest incident. The question is, when is it legal to use tasers in South Korea? I mean, can the police use it whenever they want or feel the need to do so?
So to make a long story short, yes, it is legal to use tasers in Korea. However, the police should not use tasers whenever they want to. But these recent series of senseless crimes outbroken in public can be a turning point for the police to use the lethal police equipment in a less restrictive way. The tasers have been adopted since 2004 after a tragic incident that two police officers killed by a suspect using a deadly weapon. The police wanted to adopt equipment which is less lethal than a gun, but effective enough for the suppression. However, after the several fatal incidents of the civilians by the police tasers, there have been strict guidelines and regulations for tasers. First, according to the Act on the Performance of Duties by Police Officers, the lethal police equipment shall be restricted to the necessary minimum. Also, before actually using tasers, the police should not only assess the situation whether it is necessary for the police to use tasers, but also warn the suspect for using tasers. And the police must avoid lethal body parts such as a neck or face for the aim.
Right. Even if it's illegal to use tasers here in the country, it can be a complicated process. The South Korea's Justice Ministry is also planning to establish new legal provisions, right, to seek stern punishment for people who get caught writing online murder threats, including seeking damages. Now, how will that work? Seeking damages from suspects?
As you mentioned, the Ministry of Justice has announced that the government will officially file a lawsuit, including seeking damages from suspects. Well, I can say that the government suing a group of citizens for civil disputes is not what you can see every day in normal circumstances. According to the announcement that the act of writing online murder threats can be regarded as unlawful actions, provided that the government can argue all the costs for the police operations and government expenditures for prevention of potential public crimes which are caused by those people writing online threats shall be compensated by using legal establishments.
Then I have to ask you, how effective will the measure be? I mean, will it be effective enough to stop those people from causing such social disturbances?
Well, in my personal opinion, the idea for the government to sue dozens of citizens is more of a political show to satisfy an angry public and will not be very effective enough to stop potential anti-social criminals in the long term. First of all, I'm not sure the court will admit correlation and causality between the action of writing some inappropriate text online and the damages of the government. Secondly, even if the court acknowledged the liability of damages, I assume the amount of compensation would not be enough to scare the potential suspect. So I think this measure of the Ministry of Justice filing a lawsuit could be derived from the scope of temporal solutions for these unexpected situations.
Right, but in the meantime, the country is experiencing a serious shortage in the number of police personnel. Still, the government is considering reinstating a previously utilized auxiliary police system. What legal process should there be to bring those personnel back?
Well, the shortage of police personnel has always been an issue, especially after the auxiliary police system was abolished in May this year, and a new type of crime soaring these days in Korea. But the government and the police were failed to react in time, staring for a 100% predictable problem, which is a shortage of police personnel. Well, in fact, although there are no official recruitment plans for now, the legal establishment for the auxiliary police is still there. So it can be said it is solely up to the government's will and budget to decide whether the auxiliary police companies will be enforced once again for the safety of the public.
All right, Mr. Guan, thank you so much for your insight this morning. You have a great day.
Thank you.
A highly anticipated 6-day Chuseok holiday period starting late September and going into early October may come true if South Korea's top office approves a request made by the ruling party. Our Kim Do-yeon has this report.
The ruling People Power Party has made a request to the presidential office to review designating Monday, October 2nd as a temporary holiday, creating a 6-day long holiday period. Opening the leadership meeting on Monday, the party's chairman, Kim Gi-yeon, announced that the request has been made as South Korea looks forward to its first long holiday since COVID-19 became a Class 4 virus, the lowest designation for managing diseases like the seasonal flu. South Korea celebrates its annual Chuseok holiday or Thanksgiving on Thursday the 28th and Friday the 29th of September. The following Tuesday, October 3rd, is National Foundation Day. The addition of temporary holiday on Monday in between would mean a prolonged 6-day vacation period. Kim also added this could boost the domestic economy through the long holidays, with many schools autonomously already deciding to close on that day. Now that the request has been made, the top office will review the request. Upon formal discussion between the PPP and the government, it will be put on the agenda for a cabinet meeting where members will review its designation. Cabinet meetings usually take place every Tuesday, but it isn't on the agenda for this week's meeting yet, meaning it will likely be September 5th before a decision is made. Back in 2017, then President Moon Jae-in designated October 2nd a temporary holiday, giving people 10 straight days off. Kim Do-yeon, Arirang News.
Now, speaking of Chuseok, there are worries that the high inflation may take a bite out of Chuseok luncheons and dinners, with consumer price growth likely to rebound to more than 3% due to oil price pressures. Moon Hae-ryun reports.
Concerns over rising food and oil prices continue to persist in South Korea as consumers prepare for the Korean Thanksgiving holiday in late September. According to a report released by the Bank of Korea on Monday, persistent heavy rain coupled with extreme heat in the country will likely contribute to price hikes for fresh produce. In July, the price of lettuce and spinach almost doubled, and prices for agricultural goods rose by 4.7% compared to the year before. While the overall on-year consumer price index growth fell to the 2% mark last month, the Ministry of Economy and Finance predicted on Sunday that it will jump back up to the 3% mark over the next 2 months. July's growth rate measuring at 2.3% was the lowest seen in over 2 years and came after 5 consecutive months of decline in the on-year increase. Eased inflation was largely attributed to weakening oil prices, but with oil prices rising for 7 weeks in a row in South Korea, this is expected to change. On average, gasoline prices stood at around $1.31 per litre last week, a large jump from $1.18 at the start of last month. This comes on the back of a resurgence in global oil prices, which have gone up since July, with prices for Brent crude oil jumping by around $10 per barrel during the July to August period, and prices in South Korea affected the 2 to 3 week delay. With the national holiday Chuseok at the end of September into October, the ministry expects high prices to persist with high demand, as consumers buy food and gifts for the holidays. Finance Minister Chu, however, stated in a National Assembly meeting last week that the inflation rate will drop to the 2% mark again following the holiday and maintain an average of some 2% until the end of the year. Moon Hae-ryun, Arirang News.
Good morning, I'm Matthew Ashley, and we now turn over to stories from around the world. We begin in the United Kingdom, where a technical issue has affected air traffic control systems and left thousands of passengers stranded. Now, issues started on Monday when the National Air Traffic Service's automatic processing of flight plans malfunctioned and had to be handled manually. It also meant that the number of planes landing needed to be temporarily restricted. The glitch lasted several hours but was fixed on the same day. Now, despite this, airports and airlines have warned that delays could continue for a few days. According to aviation data, around 8% of flights departing UK airports and 9% of incoming flights were affected on Monday. Passengers due to fly have been asked to head to airports only after confirming that their flights will depart as scheduled. Now, France is set to ban school children from wearing abayas in public schools. Abayas are loose-fitting full-length robes worn by some Muslim women. The government announced on Monday that they would be banned from September, the start of the next academic year. The ban drew applause from the country's right, but those on the left claim it violates Muslim women's rights, while opposition lawmakers have called it a new Islamophobic campaign. France has employed strict bans on religious symbols such as large crosses in schools since the 19th century. It says such symbols violate secular laws. Now, in the United States, the opening of a roughly 200-year-old lead box at the military academy West Point ended in disappointment. The much-anticipated opening was live-streamed on Monday and attended by staff, students and a panel of historians. But the box turned out to be empty, with nothing inside except some mud and silt. The mysterious box was discovered in May during the removal of a statue, leading experts to guess that it was a time capsule put in place when the statue was erected in 1829. Its composition meant that historians were unable to scan the box's contents before its opening. The box's muddy contents will be analyzed for anything of value. And finally, crowds gathered at a UK pub on Monday to watch the World Gravy Wrestling Championships. 16 men and 8 women took to the condiment-filled ring at a pub in Rossendale, Lancashire, to compete for the title. Now, the pub has been holding the annual event since 2007 to raise money for charity. Fights last 2 minutes and some 2,000 litres of gravy are used over the event. Gravy wrestlers are judged by a 4-person panel that scores them on wrestling ability, comedic timing and fancy dress. This year saw Raven Gravy win the men's division, while Baku Bavarian clinched the women's title.
Good morning. Well, haven't we had enough rain already this season? It's another wet start to the day in most parts of the country. It's drizzling in the capital, but the southern coast of Jeollanam-do province and mountainous regions of Jeju Island are seeing heavy rainfall, with a heavy rain advisory issued in parts of Jeju Island this morning. Thick rain clouds will keep moving in from the west coast today. In east of Jeollanam-do and west of Gyeongsang-namdo provinces could see more than 150 millimeters of downpours until tomorrow. Nearby areas could see up to 120 millimeters. Heavy rain will hammer down on central regions today, and southern regions will be drenched today and tomorrow. Top temperatures will hover below 30 degrees Celsius this afternoon, similar to slightly lower than Monday. Coastal areas and mountainous regions in Gangwon-do province, though, will have gusty winds along with heavy rainfall. Those in the south need to brace for downpours through Wednesday, but on and off rain will continue through the remainder of the week. That's Korea for you, and here's a look at the international weather conditions.
We thank you for watching New Day at Arirang. We'll be back tomorrow at the same time, 9 a.m. Korea time.
한국에 오면 먹어야죠. 먹어도 끝이 없는 나라. 감당할 수 있겠니? 하나, 둘, 셋.
Hey, Mr. Cupid, who's mine? Make sure you listen to what I say. I may be stupid or quite naive.
끝없이 쏟아지는 포토스팟. 휴대폰 한 대로 감당할 수 있겠니?
Arrow straight through my heart.
웰컴. (24시간) 불이 꺼지지 않는 나라. 감당할 수 있겠니?
Hello everyone, I'm Savitri Panaboke, Ambassador of Sri Lanka to the Republic of Korea. For people like me who is very interested to learn more about Korea, Arirang TV is a valuable source of information. Arirang TV is like a bridge that connects Korea to the rest of the world. I have learned so much about Korea's history, culture and people through Arirang. It is also a leading channel for news and diplomacy and current affairs, and I look forward to learning more about Korea through Arirang TV. Resonating with the world, Arirang.
한국에 오면 먹어야죠. 먹어도 끝이 없는 나라. 감당할 수 있겠니? 웰컴. 엄청난 에너지를 춤으로 뿜어내는 나라. 감당할 수 있겠니? 웰컴. 24시간 불이 꺼지지 않는 나라. 감당할 수 있겠니?
We're here to make a new type of news. New insights, new styles, and new topics every day.
We are News Generation.
Making news just for you. It's August 29th here in Seoul. I'm Yoon, and this is News Generation, where we make the news at Arirang's very own open studio. Every morning, we'll discuss the top issues and latest current affairs affecting people in their 20s and 30s. Joining me in the studio is Choi Ji-hee.
Good morning.
Good morning. And Kim Si-young.
Good morning, yeah.
Now, both are here to speak on behalf of those in their 20s and 30s. As usual, let's start with our news feed, which covers different hashtags and news items that have been trending on social media over the past 24 hours. France is soon to throw out around 100 swimming pools worth of wine. That's because the country has seen a drop in demand for wine, which has led to overproduction. To help French winemakers overcome financial difficulties, officials on Friday said they would allocate $216 million to destroy the surplus wine. That's around 66 million gallons worth of wine. Moving on, despite concerns that customers would no longer want to eat seafood, a fish market in Seoul saw its profits double on the first weekend following Fukushima's treated wastewater discharge. Officials said it's too soon to be relieved, though, because a big portion of customers most likely visited the fish market thinking that the seafood out on stock wouldn't be affected by the release of wastewater. And we may be able to enjoy a 6-day holiday in the first week of October. The country's ruling People Power Party requested the presidential office to designate October 2nd, which falls on a Monday, as a temporary holiday. The days leading up to this date are when the country celebrates its annual Thanksgiving holiday, also known as Chuseok. The day after, October 3rd, is National Foundation Day, so if October 2nd were to be changed into a temporary holiday, we would be able to enjoy a full 6 days off. And a final decision will most likely be made by September 5th. And back in 2017, the president at the time, Moon Jae-in, did designate October 2nd as a temporary holiday. And at the time, people could enjoy 10 straight days off. Now, I'd like to expand the newsfeed to the studio. Si-young, are you looking forward to seeing October 2nd be included as a temporary holiday?
You know what, I mean, I would have in any other year, but this year I do have a business, well, it's a study trip that I'm actually organizing for a foreign delegation, Korea inbound program. And I was already concerned because we had the 3rd of October, which is the Korea National Foundation Day. But now that the 2nd is going to be also a holiday, it's a big problem. That's going to hinder all my plans. I love holidays usually, but for this year, it might cause more problems.
It could be a bit of a hassle for you.
It is, yeah, it would be.
What about you, Ji-hee?
Oh, definitely, yes.
Why?
Wait till holiday. I mean, I feel sorry for Si-young for the whole trip that you have to organize, but I would love to see this 2nd of October turn into a holiday. And I mean, I'm a freelancer, so it might not really apply to me like every day because I don't have a 9 to 6 working hour. But speaking for all the office workers out there, I would say yes. And for myself too, I would definitely say yes. And I'm already thinking of where to go.
Really?
Any long holiday plans?
I might want to go to Taiwan if this turns into a holiday.
Yeah.
But let's just hope that this, sorry, Si-young, but...
What about you? Are you excited?
Yeah.
I'm very excited. I'm going to speak on behalf of all the office workers out there who have to be working 9 to 6. I mean, even if it's not a national holiday, I think a lot of people are going to be using their paid days off to actually use this day as a holiday.
Of course.
But we'll have to see what happens. All right, and that was our news feed for this Tuesday. And we're coming back from a very hot summer. As we've seen record heat waves hit the country, temperatures have definitely pushed some people to the extremes, such as wearing bikinis on the street, not even close to a pool or beach. And we're going to be taking a look at the recent bikini controversy here in Korea.
This summer, we've been seeing incidents of women in bikinis roaming around central Seoul. Earlier this month, a woman was spotted riding an electric scooter in just a bikini. On the very same day, police received a report about 4 women in bikinis and helmets riding motorcycles in Seoul's Gangnam-gu district. These incidents have spurred heated debates online. While some said it's an individual's right to wear whatever they want, others said it was an obscene way of asking for attention. Police even considered whether to charge these women with indecent exposure, where people can be fined up to $75 for social misconduct at public places.
Wearing bikinis in the middle of Seoul. We're talking about regular streets and roads where pedestrians, children, and office workers walk by, and the incidents that spurred online debates all took place in the center of the city where no pool or beach was found. And I'm sure you guys heard about the recent bikini controversy in Korea. So what was your initial reaction to that?
Well, at first, my response was, what's the big deal, really?
Right. Yeah.
Because I believe that the urge to express oneself, and we've talked about this a lot before, the younger generation, they have that urge to express themselves. However, if it was a formal event, like as in a conference or a business meeting, I'd say wearing bikinis, of course, would have been quite inappropriate because it's not considering the TPO, the dress code.
Wear,
Exactly. But then on the streets, I think it really is your own choice and your own freedom. It's your right, really, to express yourself. And this incident, the woman turned out to be an influencer. And I thought it was really interesting how she thought about this whole controversy, because she apologized to some people who felt quite uncomfortable seeing her express herself in her bikinis. But at the same time, she said she felt this sense of liberation. And in addition to this incident, actually these days, there's quite a lot of criticism at women, like increasing the number of women wearing bikinis in valleys, like streams, as well as in swimming pools in apartment complexes and community centers.
Do you think it's getting worse? Do you think people are more inclined to criticize people these days wearing bikinis?
Oh, I think so. I think it's because they see more people wearing them.
But you mentioned a good point. I think now the controversy is where is the most appropriate time, place, and occasion to be wearing bikinis. Now, what did you think once you heard this recent bikini controversy?
Yeah, well, I mean, as you said, bikinis, you keep mentioning that they're nowhere close to pools or the beach or whatever. And I mean, obviously, bikinis are swimwear initially. So it does make sense that you should be wearing it to go swimming. But obviously, I think the opinions divide into 2 groups as well. The first would be that it's culturally and then morally even wrong to publicly expose skin, versus as long as no one's performing sexual activities or too much of an indecent exposure, that it should be allowed without any criticism, and showing skin should be personal freedom. But I mean, it seems that across all generations, cases of excessive exposure make an issue now and then. For example, last year in Busan, there was a man in his 40s who was actually arrested and charged, was fined for wearing thongs and hot pants, so exposing his buttocks in public, as well as a few other cases in Suwon, which didn't actually have any penalties. So it depends on the case by case which gets penalized and which doesn't. And it seems like right now, we should be able to feel liberated. We should be able to wear whatever we want, whenever we want, as long as you don't actually directly harm anybody. I mean, culturally, of course, things like the bikini girl on the motorcycle can impose a certain sort of level of cultural differences. People might be shocked on the streets. But as you mentioned before in the rehearsals, you were saying that the guy who was also topless didn't get as much criticism. He was actually even praised by everyone saying, oh, he's got a great body, he's in shape.
They lauded their body.
Which is very controversial, which doesn't actually make sense. It should be very equal stance, if anything.
So there's definitely a gender perspective that we will take a look on. But before we do that, I think that we are seeing split opinions as to whether it was appropriate or not for this woman to be wearing a bikini in the middle of Seoul. But why don't we figure out to what extent we think it's okay to wear a bikini? So I have a few questions to ask you guys based on the TPO. What's the most appropriate TPO to wear a bikini? And the first question is, so could you hold up your OX panels?
Okay.
So do you guys think it's okay to wear a bikini at swimming pools or that are inside apartment complexes or community centers? And mind you, that these community centers, swimming pools are like family oriented. You'd see little toddlers on the street, okay? So let's see if you guys have an answer.
Who's gonna go first?
With an OX. T, you wanna go first?
I'd say no.
No, okay, no bikinis at these.
No, I wouldn't wear bikinis in
Why
these
not?
places because they're family oriented. There are children, and they're pretty closed spaces. You know, if it's on a beach, I would feel more free to wear bikinis, and people won't be staring at you as much. I feel like you know because these places, like I said, are very closed, and you have different age groups of people in the apartment complexes as well as the community centers. And usually in community centers, you learn how to swim. There are lessons going on.
You vigorously swim too.
Exactly. So I think it's not very appropriate because it doesn't feel very comfortable to be wearing them. This is a personal
anecdote. Yeah. What about you, Xiang?
I think.
You're okay.
Yeah,
why?
I think you should be able to wear whatever you want, especially in an apartment complex. You'll probably be in the pool because you live there.
Yeah.
And you might just come for literally just a chill, you know, you want to lay on the one of those sun beds or whatever and just chill out for a minute, read a book, and you don't really want to do excessive swimming, so it might come in, so if it's not so, I mean, also it depends on the bikinis, I guess. If you're in sort of a Borat-style mankini string bikini, of course it's going to be a hot issue.
That's a good point, yeah.
But if you're wearing just a, average bikini that's not too overly exposing, as most people wear, I think it has no problem.
It'd be okay.
Especially if you, I mean, nowadays people go to vacations, what we call hotel vacations and things like that. People just literally go stay in a hotel instead of going to a location. They use the pool beach just to, hang around with their families or with their loved ones, taking pictures, having a picnic basically, and they want to look pretty. So it's very normal for hotel pools to wear bikinis, and now all of a sudden apartment complexes are like, oh, no bikinis on. I don't think that makes sense.
Yeah, the main argument behind that is that there's so many kids there and toddlers that are there to learn swimming lessons. But as you mentioned,
but what do you think kids will think? Kids will be like, oh wow, there's a woman in a bikini.
Right, that's true. This is a controversial point.
I don't understand.
Hotels, I'd say yes.
Yeah, hotels, I'd say yes.
Well, what's the difference between an apartment complex?
Because like I don't want my residents, my neighbors,
maybe it's because you might have a personal connection with these people.
I don't know. I'd feel very uncomfortable.
And you feel embarrassed a little bit.
All right, and very briefly, guys, what about in valleys or streams?
Valleys?
Yeah, like little streamways, kegguk in Korean. Would you be wearing? Oh, you.
Yeah. Well,
you're an advocate of bikinis, by the way.
Well, I'm an advocate of people wearing whatever they want.
Yeah.
I mean, I really don't mind. I mean, because also, I think the problem lays when someone sexualizes the object, the person who's wearing something. It shouldn't be like that. If nobody cares whether you're naked or you're wearing a bikini or you're in a burqa, then it should be perfectly fine. There's no problem in both ways. But just because you're wearing a bikini somewhere you kind of think it's inappropriate, just to criticize them on the grounds that they're doing that, on the grounds of what they're wearing, it doesn't actually make sense, especially valleys or beaches. People should be free whatever they want to wear.
Right. Now, to play the devil's advocate yet again, the difference between valleys and streams and beaches is that beaches are much wider. A lot of people are there. They're wearing
but valleys
their swimwear.
Are very private.
But they're very private.
There might be nobody around.
Yeah, and not a lot of people do wear swimwear there, right?
Exactly.
Because it's dangerous.
Because you're not supposed to swim there.
Yeah, you're not supposed to swim there. And I've never swam in these valleys before. I would just be splashing water, putting my feet in the cold water. So I'd say no, yes, but no.
Yes, but no, what's that?
So it's okay, of course. I'm not the person who sets these standards, but I wouldn't be wearing them. personal reasons again, because I would feel very uncomfortable wearing them, and I don't usually swim in these valleys, and it's more natural to just be wearing like a t-shirt or a short pants.
Exactly,
So I think for you, Chihi, you really do consider TPO. As for Xiong, I think you prefer like personal preference, right? It really comes down to the person.
I think so, yeah.
Now, my last question I have for you in this prior part of our discussion is, as you mentioned, Xiong, there's a gender perspective to this issue, right? What do you think about that?
I mean, there is definitely a gender issue going on regarding the TPO, regarding formal wear or informal wear, even swimwear. A lot of people, it seems like, especially in Korea, that men are less of a victim of sexualization overall in the world as well. You know, men are more fine with being topless, whereas, you know, women actually have to protest to be topless and actually have to sign petitions. There have been movements, free the nipple, if I may say, things like that, to actually liberate females as well in what they want to wear and how they conduct their body as well. So I think it's a very, very sort of socially unacceptable phenomena where it's okay for men to be topless and go around, you know, with sleeveless tops, you know, showing their muscles. But as soon as women tend to wear, you know, something really tight, leggings or gym wear, everyone would be like, oh, that's too much for us.
Right.
You know, if it's too much for you, then just don't say anything and look somewhere else. You can't just be, close your eyes.
Keep your own boundaries.
There's no reason to criticize someone who's in public doing what they want.
Yeah, you're representing a big portion of what a lot of millennials are thinking out there in Korea. But as I mentioned before in our intro video, the woman that had been stirred up in the recent bikini controversy could potentially have faced a fine, specifically for offending people by excessively exposing their body. And to find out more about this law, let's include a legal expert in our talks. Let's add a legal perspective to our issue today by talking to a lawyer. It's Kim Jisoo. Welcome, Jisoo.
Good morning, Jisoo.
Good morning. Thank you for having me here.
All right, Jisoo, so I'm curious, what happened to the woman who wore bikinis on motorcycles in Central Seoul earlier this month? Were they penalized, and what types of penalties could they have faced?
Well, she was caught on the spot and currently going through a police investigation, and the investigation normally takes about up to 2 to 3 months. So the incident happened just a couple weeks ago, and the result had yet to come. However, the women involved in the incidents are highly subject to legal repercussions. So some of you can ask, can someone actually be punished for being undressed in public? And the answer is yes. So based on South Korea's Minor Offenses Act, anyone who excessively exposes their body in a manner that offends or embarrasses in public spaces could face charges, and if found guilty, the fine could be up to 100,000 Korean won, roughly $75. And there's also a provision under the criminal code regarding so-called obscene performance, which carries a much more severe penalty, so a penalty of up to 1 year in prison.
I see. So, Jisoo, so you mentioned this law called Minor Offenses Act, which states that anybody who offends or embarrasses anybody else by, quote, excessively exposing their body in public spaces could be fined up to $75. But the wording used is very subjective and vague. Could you better define this law, and where and how can we not wear bikinis or expose too much skin?
Okay, certainly the Minor Offenses Act, as described, does seem to use subjective language. So it may be helpful to clarify the specific circumstances that constitute excessive exposure to provide more guidance to law enforcement, for the masses, and for the public. And with the following question, when and where can we wear bikinis or expose too much skin? Well, bikinis might be seen as appropriate at the beach or a pool, that in the debate you mentioned before, or any kind of venue where swimwears or similar attires is expected to be. But it could be considered excessive in central city areas like Hongdae or Gangnam, where such attire might be seen as out of the norm and could cause offense or embarrassment. So Overall, this Minor Offenses Act does plays an important role in maintaining public order and safety in South Korea. But as you mentioned, it is important to ensure that the language used in the law is clear and objective to avoid such kind of confusion and potential abuse of power.
Yeah, of course, Chusha. I mean, I think that's a great point also Ji-hee made. I did speak about a case in Busan last year where a man did get fined, but the same year, a man in Suwon who wore the same basically thongs in public didn't actually get any penalization. So I guess it really depends on the subjectiveness of the law. But I'd like to hear about the cases abroad for our global audiences. Are there any penalization process similar to Korea in other countries around the world?
Well, of course, as some of you might have already expected, Korea is definitely not the only one. Many countries have laws regarding public indecency, exposure, or obscenity. In the United States, it's illegal to expose one's genitals in public, and this can be classified as public indecency or indecent exposure. And the same goes by in the United Kingdom, Australia, Canada, Singapore, and so on. And their penalties often include fines or imprisonments. And although it is important to note that these kind of penalties may vary depending on the specific circumstances and the interpretation of the law. However, in general, displaying nude is mostly considered indecent and offensive. So when it comes to public nudity, less is not more, is just illegal.
All right. Thank you so much, Jisoo. It was such a pleasure to be talking to you today.
Thank you.
All right, and if we elaborate on the last issue that Jisoo brought up, we're going to be focusing on today's topic in more of a global perspective. Take a look at the screen to find out what 3 of our viewers had to say on today's discussion topic. So Fizzwater said, I like the concept of no shirt, no shoes, no service. Some stores have these signs up to enforce health and safety regulations in a, quote, nice way. Kite said, in Japan, women often wear bikinis to the beach. However, because a 2-piece bikini can be a bit rather revealing and thereby immodest, it is common to see people wearing their normal clothes too. Merlin said there are no set rules for bikini wearing, but the ritzy restaurants are probably not going to allow it among their wealthy customers. And at church, it's not a good idea to wear a bikini to watch the sermon. So yet again, I think another key word is where you are wearing these bikinis. Yeah. But I think the perception that people have here in Korea and abroad is different, right?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, most European countries like France, Germany, Spain, do actually allow a lot of nudity. In Germany especially, there is a huge nudist community as well. So I mean, it really depends on the culture, I think. And just next to it, Islamic countries, of course, you can't show most of any of your skin. I mean, Ji-hee, if you want to elaborate on the bikinis and things like that.
Right.
Yes.
So for women, they're not allowed to expose any of their skin parts. So if they want to go swimming, they wear what they call bikinis, and they're basically swimsuits.
Bikinis, eh?
Yes, bikinis. They look like diving suits, so they cover up most of their body parts. And like you mentioned, I think it's the acceptability of wearing bikinis and clothes that expose your skin depends on the different cultural and religious background of a state.
Such a good point, yeah.
Yes, so Asian cultures, they tend to be more conservative with what they wear. But then the thing is, the important part here is wearing something that's appropriate for a specific occasion is the common rule and the norm of all cultures, I think.
Yeah, I think that's the takeaway today. I think we should be able to just wear, appropriate attires. And I think, to be honest, social oppression, in my opinion, leads to over-fantasization. So if people keep thinking, it's very inappropriate to wear bikinis, or you got to cover up when you're in certain spaces, it's going to lead up to other people thinking, so if we see a bit of skin, that's very exciting. We should do something that we shouldn't be allowed to do. And we should get rid of that sort of, not oppression, but sort of social stigma regarding fashion sense as well.
And we've actually been already seeing that a lot of celebrities, like in water bomb festivals and water festivals, they're wearing like these swimwear as fashionable attire, which is why a lot of people are getting a bit more open to the idea, starting from our generation.
That's great.
All right, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts on this latest issue. And we'll be here every day from 9:30 to 10 a.m. Korea time, bringing you more topics young people are talking about. Special thanks to Ji-hee.
Always a pleasure.
And Kim Xiang.
My pleasure.
All right, and thank you everyone for watching. We'll see you tomorrow. We are New Generation.
아름다운 건 겁없이 외치던 날 사랑했나
Gyeongsang Namdo. Sangcheong, we're opening the Donghi Bogam. You can meet a variety of Hanbang, Korean medicine for vitality, Korean medicine for healing, Korean medicine for joy, Korean medicine for expo. 2023 World Traditional Medicine and Anti-Aging